the overseer's secret punishment, and the slave who risked everything to stop it. The sun burned low over the Georgia plantation, casting long, harsh shadows across the cotton fields. The wind carried dust and the faint scent of wet earth from a storm that had passed days earlier, and in the air there was a tension that felt almost physical. Slaves moved methodically through the rows, their hands raw from labor, faces etched with exhaustion and quiet defiance. Among them, Isaiah kept his head low, careful to follow the rhythm of work without attracting attention. Dunn, the overseer, stalked the fields with the certainty of a predator. His boots dug into the dirt with each step, a sharp counterpoint to the soft murmur of the workers. He carried a whip at his side, not just a tool of punishment, but a weapon of authority, a symbol of control. Rumors about his methods circulated among the slaves. Harsh, secretive punishments for perceived disobedience, administered with precision to inspire fear without leaving visible proof. Isaiah had seen Dunn's cruelty firsthand. He had witnessed men beaten for minor infractions, left trembling under the oppressive sun, and whispered warnings of worse fates, solitary confinement, extra labor, denial of food. It was the secrecy that was most dangerous, a punishment inflicted in shadows, leaving the punished isolated and powerless. That morning, Isaiah noticed something unusual. A younger slave, barely old enough to understand the hierarchy, was being led toward the overseer's small, out-of-the-way hut near the edge of the property. The boy's face was pale, eyes wide, lips trembling. Something about Dunn's look, a tightness around his mouth, a coldness in his eyes, sent a chill down Isaiah's spine. He recognized that look. It meant control, fear, and cruelty. And the master's wife appeared on the veranda of the main house, dressed in a simple gown, but there was a tension in her stance, a sharpness in her gaze that contrasted with the expected calm of propriety. She had been watching the younger boy and Dunn for a moment, her brow furrowed, lips pressed tightly together. Her presence was unexpected. She rarely interfered in such matters, but today there was urgency in her eyes. Isaiah moved cautiously closer, keeping to the shadows near the cotton rows. He could hear fragments of conversation, low enough that ordinary ears might not catch them, but sharp and clear to one who was listening. Dunn's voice was calm, deliberate, but every word carried an unspoken threat. "Boy," Dunn said, "you've broken the rules, and rules must be enforced. You understand consequences, don't you?" The boy swallowed hard, voice barely a whisper. "Why, yes, sir." Isaiah's heart pounded. He knew the overseer's secret punishments were not arbitrary. They were designed to instill fear, to ensure obedience, but also to maintain a facade of order. No one outside these walls would ever know what happened, and no one inside dared speak. And stepped down from the veranda, her skirts brushing the ground, eyes fixed on the scene. She approached Isaiah quietly, her voice low, almost urgent. "Isaiah," she whispered, "you must watch. Something is about to happen, and you may be the only one who can prevent it." Isaiah's stomach tightened. Every instinct screamed that intervening would be dangerous. Dunn's punishments were swift and precise, leaving no room for mistakes. But the fear he saw in the younger boy's eyes, innocent, raw, trembling, struck something deep inside him. The overseer's hand lifted slightly, palm opening as if to signal authority. The boy flinched, and in that instant, Isaiah knew that action was required. A quiet, calculated decision formed in his mind. He could not stand by. To act would mean risk, risk of punishment, risk of exposure, risk of making a mistake that could cost him dearly. But he also knew that doing nothing was a choice too, and the weight of that choice was unbearable. Anne's hand touched his arm briefly, a silent acknowledgement, urging him forward. "Be careful," she whispered, "but you cannot wait. He is about to carry out his plan." Isaiah moved closer, keeping to the shadows, senses heightened. The world seemed to narrow. The overseer's movements, the trembling boy, Anne's watchful presence. Every moment stretched into a lifetime. The secret punishment, the one whispered about in fearful tones among the slaves, was about to begin, and Isaiah knew that if he failed, the consequences would ripple far beyond the immediate moment. Dunn stepped closer to the boy, voice softening only to make the command feel inevitable, unavoidable. Isaiah's pulse raced. He could see the fear in the boy's eyes, could feel the oppressive weight of authority pressing down. Every step, every breath mattered. And in that tense silence, Isaiah made a choice. He would risk everything to stop what was coming. The plantation seemed to hold its breath. The wind stilled, the birds hushed, and for a single, suspended moment, the fate of one young slave and the courage of another hung in balance. The wind picked up across the fields as Isaiah edged closer to the overseer's hut, mud squelching under his feet with every careful step. The younger boy was now just a few feet from the building, shoulders slumped in resignation, eyes darting nervously to Dunn's hand resting near the whip at his side. Every muscle in Isaiah's body tensed. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down like a physical burden. Anne's presence lingered near the cotton rows, silent but alert. She had positioned herself where she could observe without being noticed, a subtle shield for Isaiah, her gaze constantly scanning for anyone who might interfere. There was fear in her eyes, yes, but also a quiet determination that mirrored Isaiah's own resolve. Dunn's voice cut through the tension, low and deliberate. "You know why you're here, boy. Actions have consequences. I'm giving you a chance to understand before things get unpleasant." The boy swallowed, trembling visibly. "Why, yes, sir," he whispered, barely audible over the rustle of leaves. Isaiah crouched slightly behind a stack of crates, scanning for any opportunity. He knew confronting Dunn directly would be suicide. But there had to be a way, some subtle move that could interrupt the punishment without exposing himself completely. A sudden noise from the corner of the yard drew Isaiah's attention. A loose board shifted under the weight of a stray branch, sending a faint creak through the air. Dunn's head snapped toward the sound, nostrils flaring. The tension in the moment thickened, and Isaiah felt the first taste of panic rise in his chest. Anne's whisper reached him through the distance, a lifeline in the storm of fear. "Now, Isaiah, go!" He moved with deliberate stealth, keeping low, careful to stay hidden in the shadows. Every step mattered. A single misstep could mean the boy's punishment would begin, and not just a simple lash or reprimand. Dunn's secret punishments were whispered about for a reason. They were designed to break a person, to instill terror without leaving visible proof. As Isaiah drew closer, he noticed the boy's hands trembling uncontrollably, clutching at the edge of the door to the hut. Dunn's eyes were sharp, focused, calculating. He was the predator in every sense, and Isaiah knew that any attempt to interfere would be noticed immediately. A sudden clap of thunder rolled across the plantation, startling both Isaiah and the overseer. The sound of rain beginning to patter against the leaves provided a fleeting cover, masking Isaiah's movements as he edged nearer to the hut. Then, with a quiet determination, Isaiah did something unexpected. He shifted a crate near the doorway, sending it toppling with a loud crash. The boy jumped, and Dunn's head snapped toward the sound, whip hand rising. What is this?" Dunn barked, eyes scanning for the source. Isaiah stepped from the shadows, hands raised in a gesture of non-aggression, voice calm but firm. "Sir," he said, "please let him be. He's done nothing deserving of punishment." Dunn's gaze swept over him, narrowing, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "And who are you to decide what is deserved or not?" Anne's voice joined Isaiah's, carrying across the yard, steady and authoritative despite her fear. "You cannot punish a boy for your own pride. He is innocent, and you know it. Stop this now, before it goes too far." The rain began in earnest, heavy drops hitting the ground, the hut, and their clothing. It was a sudden, driving force that forced everyone's attention outward, masking movements and sounds. Dunn's jaw tightened as he looked between the two of them. Isaiah could see the battle in his expression. Anger, authority, but also hesitation. Isaiah knew this was the moment. If he waited any longer, the secret punishment would proceed. He took a careful step closer, voice firm but respectful. "Sir, please," he said again. "It is not right. Let him go. He will obey, as he always has." "This is enough." For a long moment, silence reigned. The only sound was the pounding rain, the whip of wind through the trees, the distant clatter of tools in the fields. Then Dunn's hand fell slightly from his belt. His glare lingered, but the tension eased just enough for the younger boy to step back, trembling but relieved, and moved closer to Isaiah once the immediate danger had passed, her eyes softening with relief. "You did it," she whispered. "You stopped him. For now." Isaiah exhaled slowly, chest heaving. "For now," he agreed. "But this isn't over. Not by a long shot." The storm continued outside, masking the quiet steps of the overseer as he retreated toward the house, and for the first time, Isaiah allowed himself to breathe. The boy was safe for the moment, but the risk had only grown. Dunn's suspicion was sharper now, and the memory of defiance would not fade easily, and placed a hand briefly on Isaiah's arm, a silent acknowledgement of courage, of action taken despite fear. "We need to be careful," she said. "Tonight, he will watch. Tomorrow, he may try again. But you acted. You risked everything to save an innocent life." Isaiah nodded, feeling both the relief of success and the pressure of what was to come. The overseer's secret punishment had been interrupted, yes, but the storm of danger, suspicion, and moral choice was far from over. The plantation stretched around them, indifferent to the drama unfolding in the shadows. Slaves worked quietly, unaware of the lives balanced on the edge of courage and fear. And in that quiet, Isaiah understood something essential. Action carried consequences, courage demanded vigilance, and the storm, both outside and within, was only beginning. Night fell heavy and suffocating over the plantation. Shadows stretched long across the mud-slicked paths, and the air was thick with the lingering damp of the storm. Isaiah crouched near the edge of the quarters, listening to the rhythmic creak of the wind through the trees and the distant footsteps of the overseer. Dunn had returned to the house, but Isaiah knew better than to believe the danger had passed. Suspicion was a slow-burning fire, and it would take only one misstep for it to consume him. The younger boy, now safe in the quarters, was huddled silently in a corner, trembling with exhaustion and lingering fear. Isaiah's chest ached at the sight. He had acted to prevent the punishment, but the memory of the boy's terror remained vivid, like a weight pressing against his ribs. Anne appeared from the shadows, her skirts brushing the damp ground, eyes scanning for any sign of movement. Her hair, pinned loosely after the storm, clung to her neck, strands plastered to her forehead. Despite the chill and her own fear, she approached Isaiah with quiet determination. "They'll be watching more closely now," she whispered, voice taut with urgency. "Dunn knows something happened, even if he doesn't know exactly what. He'll be testing, probing, trying to catch us off guard." Isaiah nodded. He had felt it too, a shift in the atmosphere, the tension now thicker, sharper. Every glance from a fellow slave, every creak of the house, every distant shout from the fields could carry hidden meaning. Trust was a fragile thread here, and one wrong word could unravel it all. A sudden movement near the barn made Isaiah stiffen. Dunn's shadow appeared, lantern in hand, moving cautiously as if testing the ground. He stopped, tilting his head, listening, sensing something amiss. Isaiah ducked lower behind a stack of crates, heart hammering. Anne's hand brushed his arm. "We need to act before he discovers what you've done. You must warn someone else, someone Henry can trust. Otherwise, the consequences will fall on you." Isaiah swallowed hard. The thought of exposing himself further was terrifying. If he were caught plotting, defending, or speaking out of turn, he would face the overseer's cruelty firsthand. And yet, to remain silent, to retreat into passive survival, would condemn the younger boy to repeated punishment. He remembered Dunn's words from earlier in the day, the calculated menace in his tone. The overseer's cruelty was methodical, precise, and hidden. Punishment was more than physical, it was psychological, a strategy to instill fear and maintain control. And now, with his interference, Isaiah had painted a target on his own back. Anne's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "You are not alone," she said. "We will do this together. But you must be careful. Every step counts. One wrong move." Isaiah nodded, understanding. The breaking point had arrived. The tension was no longer hypothetical. It was immediate. Every breath, every movement carried risk. From the shadows, he observed Dunn moving closer to the quarters, lantern casting erratic beams across the yard. The overseer's sharp eyes seemed to probe every corner, every shadow, every whisper of movement. Dunn's presence was suffocating, and Isaiah felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. He knew he had to act decisively. Waiting, hesitating, second-guessing, these would not save the boy, would not protect the truth. Courage, Isaiah realized, was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. With careful steps, he moved toward the house, keeping to the shadows, every nerve alert. He had to find someone trustworthy, someone with authority or influence to prevent Dunn from carrying out his threats. Each step was a gamble, each creak of a board underfoot a potential signal of exposure, and followed silently, offering guidance, a hand at his back to steady him, not for comfort but for purpose. "There," she whispered, nodding toward a side entrance where a servant loyal to the master often moved unseen. "Use him carefully. Explain nothing more than necessary." Isaiah inhaled, steeling himself. The moment had come. The breaking point, the instant when hesitation could destroy them all, was here. He moved forward, carrying fear, responsibility, and determination like a shield. And in that instant, as Dunn's shadow loomed in the background, Isaiah realized that courage was not a momentary impulse. It was a sustained, deliberate choice made in the face of overwhelming odds, in defiance of authority, and with full awareness of the cost. The night stretched endlessly around him, the plantation silent but for the whispers of wind and the distant cries of animals. Every step he took, every cautious movement, carried the potential for disaster. Yet, Isaiah walked forward, unwavering, knowing that the breaking point had arrived, and that only decisive action could preserve life, truth, and the fragile thread of hope they all clung to. The dawn broke over the plantation in streaks of pale gold and gray, light diffusing through lingering mist that clung stubbornly to the fields. Isaiah awoke before the others, lying on a thin cot in the quarters, body aching from the tension of the night and muscles stiff from the hours crouched. In hidden corners, listening for the approach of Dunn. Though the physical threat had passed, the psychological weight of the previous evening's events pressed down on him with unrelenting pressure. His mind replayed the moments over and over. The boy trembling in the overseer's grip, Dunn's narrowed eyes, the whip poised and ready, and the precise moment he had decided to intervene. Every detail felt sharper in retrospect, as if the memory itself could wound him. He rose quietly, careful not to disturb the others. In the stillness of the quarters, he could hear the faint sounds of the plantation awakening. The clatter of buckets, the murmur of voices, the creak of doors swinging open in the main house. Each sound reminded him that life continued, indifferent to the turmoil and courage that had unfolded just hours before. Yet for Isaiah, nothing was the same. He had crossed a line, acted where caution demanded passivity, and the consequences were no longer abstract, and had already left the main house, though she had been observed slipping quietly out before sunrise. Isaiah could see her from a distance, walking along the edge of the yard, her posture taut with worry, scanning the plantation as if expecting Dunn to appear from the shadows at any moment. Her presence was both comforting and alarming. Comforting because it reminded him he was not alone. Alarming because he knew she, too, had risked everything to ensure the boy's safety. The younger boy remained in the corner of the quarters, pale and silent. He avoided Isaiah's eyes, shivering slightly, as though even acknowledging survival might draw the overseer's attention. Isaiah approached carefully, lowering his voice. "You're safe," he said, almost more to himself than to the boy. "He's gone for now. No one will hurt you today." The boy nodded once, barely perceptibly, eyes wide and unblinking. He'll come back, won't he? Isaiah swallowed hard. He did not answer immediately. The question hung between them, a specter of the overseer's cruelty. Finally, he spoke, voice steady. Perhaps. But if he does, we will be ready. You are not alone anymore. I will not let him. I will not let him punish you in secret again. A tremor ran through the boy, the faintest of nods indicating both gratitude and lingering fear. Isaiah understood entirely. Fear, once planted in the mind of someone like the boy, did not dissipate easily. It lingered, haunting every glance, every movement, a quiet weight that could be triggered by the smallest hint of authority. The hours passed with agonizing slowness. Dunn's absence was deceptive. Each time Isaiah glanced toward the house, he expected to see the overseer emerge, eyes sharp, whip in hand, ready to reassert control. The memory of the previous night's courage now weighed on him, not as triumph, but as a delicate risk, suspended by the thinnest of threads. One misstep, one rumor, one careless word, and the consequences could be catastrophic. It was mid-morning when Anne returned, moving quietly through the yard, her gaze sweeping the open space as if anticipating Dunn's every action. She approached Isaiah, voice low. You did the right thing, she said, though the words were tempered by caution. But now we must be careful. He will be looking for someone to punish, someone to make an example of, and he will not forget your interference. Isaiah nodded, eyes narrowing with both resolve and apprehension. He knew she was right. The overseer's memory was long, and his wrath meticulous. To defy him once might be forgiven, ignored, or misinterpreted, but defiance twice, especially in a boy as young as Isaiah, would likely bring consequences far worse than a simple beating. The afternoon dragged on. Isaiah worked under the sun, hands raw from the labor of cleaning tools and tending the fields, while his mind remained alert, scanning for the faintest sign of danger. Each glance toward the barn, each shadow passing the quarters, set his heart racing. He could feel the weight of scrutiny pressing from all sides, the ever-watchful eyes of other slaves who had heard fragments of the previous night, the looming figure of Dunn somewhere just beyond sight, and the silent judgment of a system designed to punish those who stepped out of line. Then, as the sun tilted low toward the horizon, an incident occurred that brought the tension to a fever pitch. Dunn appeared unexpectedly at the edge of the quarters, lantern swinging in his hand, eyes scanning with predatory precision. Isaiah froze, body taut with fear, muscles poised for instant reaction. He could feel the younger boy shrink further into the corner, hiding behind a bundle of cloth as if that small gesture could shield him from the overseer's wrath. You, Dunn barked, voice low and cutting. Come here. Isaiah stepped forward, hands open to show he carried no tools, no threat. His mind raced. How much had Dunn pieced together? Did he know it had been Isaiah who intervened? Or was it the younger boy's nervous glance that had drawn attention? Each possibility carried its own peril, each outcome a threat to life, freedom, or dignity. You've been meddling, Dunn said, lips tight. I know you've been interfering where you do not belong. This cannot continue. Isaiah swallowed, keeping his voice calm though his chest threatened to rise and fall uncontrollably. Sir, I only acted to prevent harm, he said. The boy was innocent. He had done nothing to deserve your punishment. Dunn's gaze bore into him, slow and deliberate, a calculation of both authority and malice. You speak boldly, he said, tone low and dangerous. Do you understand the consequences of defiance? Isaiah nodded slightly. Yes, sir. I understand. The overseer's jaw tightened. For a tense moment, nothing moved except for the sway of the lantern, casting flickering light across faces pale with fear and resolve. Then Dunn turned sharply and strode back toward the house, muttering threats under his breath. The immediate danger had passed, but Isaiah knew the consequences were only beginning. As evening fell, a hushed tension settled over the quarters. The boy remained silent, eyes wide, while Isaiah's hands trembled slightly despite his attempts to remain composed. and moved near, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder, a gesture of reassurance and solidarity. "You did what you could," she said softly. "But we must prepare. Dunn will not forget. And neither will the master if he hears the wrong thing." Isaiah nodded, mind racing with contingency plans. The moral weight of their actions pressed heavily upon him. Intervening had been the right choice, yet every act of courage carried consequences, both seen and unseen. One wrong word, one misstep, and the delicate balance could shatter, bringing punishment not only to himself, but to others he sought to protect. The night deepened, shadows stretching across the plantation. Isaiah moved to the edge of the quarters, glancing toward the barn and the house. Every figure in the yard seemed charged with hidden meaning, slaves carrying out ordinary tasks yet glancing furtively, the overseer's figure looming in memory even when out of sight, Anne's determined presence a reminder of both risk and courage. In the quiet hours, Isaiah reflected on the fragile network of trust and secrecy that had formed between himself, Anne, and the younger boy. The consequences of the previous night's actions were now visible, subtle, but undeniable. Dunn's suspicion would grow, whispers would circulate, and authority would seek to reassert itself. And Isaiah, though he had acted to prevent immediate harm, was now entwined in a web of consequences that extended far beyond the single act of courage. He understood something essential. The cost of moral action in a world built on fear and power was never light. The act itself, the choice to intervene, to defy authority, to protect life, was only the beginning. The aftermath, the consequences, the need for vigilance, cunning, and patience, was where the real trial began. Hours later, as the moon rose pale and distant over the plantation, Isaiah found a moment of quiet beside the younger boy. The fear in the boy's eyes had not left entirely, but the faintest flicker of relief, trust, and hope had begun to emerge. Isaiah placed a hand lightly on the boy's shoulder, steadying him. "You will be safe tonight," he whispered. "We've bought time. That is all we can do right now." The boy nodded once, and in that small, tentative gesture, Isaiah felt a mixture of relief and renewed determination. The consequences of their actions, both past and future, loomed like a shadow, but they had survived this first wave. They had acted. They had protected life. And in that, there was a quiet victory, fragile but undeniable, and returned to the edge of the yard, eyes scanning, silent but alert. "We must remain vigilant," she said softly. "Every step, every word matters now. He will be watching, testing. But we have done what we could for today. That is enough for now." Isaiah exhaled, letting the tension ease slightly from his shoulders, though the knowledge that the struggle was far from over pressed in from all sides. The consequences of courage were never confined to the moment. They echoed, quietly, unpredictably, through the corridors of power, fear, and secrecy. And in that quiet, tense night, Isaiah realized the truth of survival on the plantation. The acts of bravery, the moral choices, the courage to intervene, all carried a price. But the cost of inaction, of silence, of passivity, was far greater. The consequences were not just personal. They touched every life around him, shaping trust, fear, and hope in equal measure. The night stretched endlessly, stars scattered across a sky heavy with clouds. The plantation lay quiet, ordinary in appearance yet charged with hidden tension. And Isaiah, watching over the boy, aware of Anne's presence nearby, understood that the storm was not yet over. Dunn's suspicion, the overseer's malice, and the rigid hierarchy of authority would continue to test them. But they had acted. They had risked everything. And in that action lay both the peril and the fragile promise of justice. The consequences, Isaiah knew, would continue to unfold. But in the stillness of the night, he allowed himself a fleeting sense of accomplishment. They had survived the first wave, faced the moral and physical danger, and protected life in a world where survival often demanded compromise, submission, or silence. And in that quiet reflection, he understood. Courage was not measured by the absence of fear, but by action taken in spite of it. The consequences of their choices would come, inevitably, but they had acted rightly. And for now, that was enough. The night came fast and heavy over the plantation, dark clouds blotting out the moon and stars. A damp chill hung in the air, clinging to the backs of Isaiah's neck and shoulders. Sleep was impossible. Every sound, the distant clatter of a bucket, the creak of a door hinge, the rustle of leaves, seemed magnified, warning of the overseer's potential presence. The memory of the younger boy's terror, the knowledge of Dunn's ruthless precision, and the tension of prior events weighed on Isaiah like chains he could not shake. Anne appeared quietly from the shadows, her skirts brushing the ground softly, eyes alert in the darkness. "He's moving closer tonight," she whispered. Her voice carried no fear, only the urgent clarity that came from experience and necessity. "I can feel it. Dunn knows something is wrong. He'll test both of you. Be ready." Isaiah nodded, muscles coiled, mind alert. He had been preparing all day, but preparation did not quell the fear that threatened to paralyze him. Tonight, he realized, would demand more than stealth or careful timing. It would demand courage, quick thinking, and unflinching action in the face of immediate danger. From the edge of the yard, a faint lantern glow signaled Dawn's presence. Isaiah crouched behind the stack of crates, muscles tensing as if ready to spring. The overseer's steps were slow, deliberate, and purposeful. Every creak of the boards under his boots, every shadow cast by the lantern, seemed calculated to intimidate and assert dominance. Dunn had walked these grounds countless times. He knew every corner, every hiding place, every path that could be used to evade his scrutiny, and moved closer to Isaiah, placing a hand lightly on his arm, not a gesture of comfort, but of solidarity. "You have done the right thing so far," she whispered. "But now, the choice will demand everything. Do not falter." Isaiah took a steadying breath. He had already risked so much to prevent the secret punishment, yet tonight would test him in ways he had not anticipated. The overseer's attention was no longer just on the boy. Now, Dunn's suspicion had focused on Isaiah. Every movement, every whispered instruction, could betray them. A sudden rustling near the barn drew Isaiah's attention. The younger boy had tried to move quietly, perhaps hoping to help in some way, but the subtle sound was enough to catch Dunn's sharp eye. The overseer's gaze swept the yard with predatory precision, stopping just short of the shadows behind which Isaiah crouched. Isaiah's heart thumped audibly in his chest, each beat a reminder of the stakes. He realized, with a sharp clarity, that hesitation would no longer suffice. The moment of truth had arrived. He moved forward deliberately, careful to remain calm and controlled, voice low but firm. "Sir," he called out, stepping into the dim light of the lantern. "Please, I must speak. The boy is innocent. He has done nothing to deserve your punishment." Dunn's eyes narrowed, the lantern shaking slightly in his grip as he regarded Isaiah with suspicion and barely veiled anger. "You again," he said, voice low and dangerous. "You presume to tell me who deserves punishment, who you think is innocent. Do you understand the consequences of your insolence?" Isaiah nodded, shoulders squared, meeting the overseer's gaze without flinching. "Yes, sir. I understand. But I cannot stand by while harm is done to someone who has done no wrong. I must act. I cannot remain silent." The overseer's jaw tightened, a flicker of menace crossing his face. "Bold words," he said, stepping closer. "Do you truly understand what you risk?" "I do," Isaiah said calmly, every word deliberate. "And yet, to do nothing. That is a far greater risk to the boy, to truth, and to justice." Dunn's hand tightened on the lantern, the shadows dancing across his face in stark contrast to Isaiah's calm resolve. For a tense moment, the air was thick with possibility, violence, reprisal, and the weight of moral decision. Then, a shout echoed from the main house, sudden and loud. Henry, the master, had appeared unexpectedly, lantern in hand, moving swiftly toward the yard. Dunn's attention snapped toward the sound, eyes flashing with irritation and unease. He muttered a curse under his breath, realizing the precariousness of his position. The master's presence was immediate authority, and for the first time in hours, Dun's confidence faltered, and stepped closer to Isaiah, her hand lightly on his shoulder, guiding him forward. "Now," she whispered, "this is your chance. Speak clearly, act decisively. There is no time to hesitate." Isaiah exhaled slowly and moved toward the master, carefully keeping his tone steady. "Sir," he began, voice carrying with clarity despite the tension, "I must inform you. The overseer intended to punish a boy for no reason, secretly, without your knowledge. I intervened to prevent harm. The boy is innocent, and the overseer's actions were cruel and unjust." Henry's eyes widened slightly at the accusation, gaze flicking between Isaiah, the overseer, and the trembling boy now emerging from the shadows. The moment hung suspended, heavy with the weight of truth and fear. Dunn opened his mouth to speak, but Henry's raised hand stopped him. "Explain yourself," Henry said, voice firm and authoritative. "I will not have injustice on my property. Speak the truth or face the consequences." Isaiah took a careful breath, speaking honestly and directly. "Sir, I watched as the boy was brought here, terrified. The overseer intended to administer punishment in secret, punishment designed to instill fear without proof. I could not allow this to happen. I risked myself to prevent it. I acted to protect life and maintain truth." Anne's gaze met Isaiah's, steady and unwavering. She had given him the courage to speak, to act decisively, and now she silently bore witness to his bravery. Her presence reinforced his resolve, her belief in justice, and her support added strength he had not known he possessed. Henry's eyes shifted to Dunn, expression hardening. "Is this true?" he demanded, voice echoing in the yard. Dunn hesitated, lips tightening. The lantern cast flickering shadows across his face, revealing both anger and the faintest hint of fear. "It was necessary to maintain order, sir," he said carefully, tone clipped and defensive. "Discipline is required." The boy had erred. Isaiah shook his head slowly. "Sir, he had done nothing. The so-called error was imagined, and the punishment would have been secret and cruel. I cannot stand by while such injustice occurs. The overseer's actions were deliberate and calculated to instill fear." Henry's eyes, sharp and discerning, studied both men. The tension was unbearable, charged with the potential for violence or vindication. Finally, he spoke, voice measured but unwavering. "The truth matters more than pride, more than authority. You, Dunn, will answer for this. And you, boy, are free from punishment. Isaiah, your courage and honesty are noted. You have acted rightly, though at great risk to yourself." A faint, almost imperceptible sigh of relief escaped Isaiah's lips. The moment of truth had passed. The overseer's authority had been challenged, decisively and publicly, and the innocent boy had been protected. The storm outside, the fear, the anticipation of violence, all had culminated in a test of moral courage, and Isaiah had emerged with integrity intact, and moved closer, placing a reassuring hand on Isaiah's arm. "You did it," she whispered. "You risked everything, and you saved him." Isaiah exhaled slowly, the weight of tension finally easing from his shoulders. The immediate danger had passed, but he knew the world of the plantation remained dangerous, harsh, and unforgiving. Every day carried the potential for conflict, injustice, or cruelty. Yet tonight, he had acted rightly, and that knowledge burned like a quiet beacon within him. Dunn was silent, lips pressed tight, hands clenched at his sides. The threat in his eyes was unmistakable, but he knew he had been checked, confronted with both truth and authority. For the first time, perhaps, he realized that fear and cruelty could be resisted, that moral action could alter outcomes even within a system built on domination and oppression. Isaiah returned to the younger boy, placing a firm, reassuring hand on his shoulder. The boy's eyes, wide with lingering terror, now held a flicker of trust and cautious relief. "You're safe," Isaiah said softly. "You can sleep tonight without fear." The boy nodded, a small, fragile gesture, and Isaiah felt a surge of protective resolve. He understood that courage was not a single act, but a continuous choice, repeated with vigilance and integrity. Protecting the innocent, standing for truth, and acting despite fear was a responsibility he had assumed fully and knowingly. And watched them both, her expression a mix of relief and somber recognition. "Tonight we have won a small victory," she said quietly. "But remember, vigilance is never over. Courage is sustained, and the choices you make echo far beyond the immediate moment." Isaiah nodded, understanding completely. The moment of truth had arrived, and he had faced it. He had risked everything, life, safety, and position, to act rightly. And now, standing in the darkened yard, under the pale glow of lanterns and moonlight filtered through clouds, he felt the quiet, enduring power of moral courage, integrity, and the knowledge that even in a world designed to enforce cruelty, small acts of bravery. For Isaiah, the night was no longer simply a span of hours. It was a testament to the strength of conscience, the necessity of action, and the profound responsibility of those who could act to protect others. The plantation remained oppressive, Dunn's malice would persist, and danger would never disappear entirely. But in that moment, with the boy safe and truth upheld, Isaiah knew the meaning of courage, and he had lived it fully. The first light of dawn crept slowly across the plantation, brushing the tops of the cotton fields with muted gold. The night storm had passed, leaving damp earth, lingering mist, and a chill that hung stubbornly in the air. Isaiah rose from a thin cot in the quarters, body stiff from the tension of the previous night and the adrenaline that had refused to leave him even as the hours of darkness wore on. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to breathe freely, but the relief was tempered by the knowledge that the plantation's fragile peace was precarious, and that the consequences of courage often unfolded slowly, like the dawn itself. The younger boy was awake as well, sitting quietly on a bench in the corner of the quarters. His eyes, once wide with fear, now held a tentative calm, though the memory of Dunn's cruelty still lingered like a shadow in the depths of his gaze. Isaiah approached him, careful not to startle or overwhelm him. "You are safe," Isaiah said softly, voice steady but gentle. "No one will harm you today. Not while I am here." The boy looked up, hesitation in his expression, then gave a small nod. "Thank you," he whispered. The words were faint, yet they carried the weight of profound relief. I thought." His voice faltered, the memory of terror evident even in this moment of safety. Isaiah placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "I know," he said quietly. "I know. But you have survived. You have endured. And we acted to protect you. That is what matters." The morning air was heavy, carrying the scent of damp soil and cotton. Isaiah's eyes moved across the yard, toward the main house. He could see Anne standing near the veranda, her figure still tense, alert, yet a small measure of relief softened the lines of her face. She caught his gaze and nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement of the danger they had faced together and the courage Isaiah had shown. The day would not erase the events of the night, nor would it remove the overseer's lingering suspicion. Dunn was a meticulous man, accustomed to control and intimidation, and Isaiah knew he would not forgive the defiance so easily. Yet the presence of the master, Henry, and the undeniable truth of the previous night's events had shifted the balance of authority, at least temporarily. Isaiah's thoughts were interrupted by a faint clatter from the barn. He moved cautiously, signaling the boy to remain still. Dunn's presence lingered like a shadow in Isaiah's mind, even though the overseer had retreated to the house after Henry's intervention. Every sound, every movement on the plantation could carry hidden meaning. Every glance between slaves or servants held the potential for revelation, suspicion, or betrayal. As Isaiah reached the barn, he saw Anne already there, inspecting the area quietly, her movements precise and deliberate. She had been methodical in her approach, ensuring that the boy would remain hidden and safe, and that no evidence of their intervention could be traced back to them unnecessarily. "We must be cautious," Anne said, her voice low and urgent. "He will test us." He will probe for weakness. The overseer is relentless, and even though the immediate danger has passed, the consequences of what has occurred will ripple across the plantation. Isaiah nodded. He understood the weight of her words. Courage, he realized, was not simply about acting in a single moment. It was about sustaining integrity, vigilance, and moral choice over time, often, in the face of relentless danger. They had acted rightly, yet the world in which they lived demanded continuous caution, intelligence, and subtlety. The younger boy approached slowly, clutching a small bundle of cloth to his chest. His steps were tentative, yet there was a measure of trust in the way he moved toward Isaiah. Will it? Will it ever be safe? He asked, voice barely audible. Isaiah crouched to meet the boy's gaze, the weight of experience and responsibility pressing down. Safe, he said carefully, is a word that changes depending on where you are. But we have done what we could. We acted with courage. And as long as we remain vigilant, as long as we support one another, we can face whatever comes next. The boy nodded slowly, a faint glimmer of understanding in his eyes. For the first time since the previous night, he allowed himself to feel a small measure of relief. It was fragile, tentative, yet it existed. And stepped closer, her expression softening slightly. You have both shown remarkable courage, she said. But remember, the world here is not kind to those who act with moral clarity. You must be careful, thoughtful, and discreet. Actions have consequences, even when they are just. Isaiah exhaled slowly. He had learned that lesson fully, though the depth of its weight had only become clear over the past 24 hours. Courage, moral action, and justice carried costs, not always immediate, not always visible, but real, tangible, and sometimes enduring. As the morning wore on, the plantation slowly returned to the rhythms of labor, the hum of activity masking the undercurrent of tension and vigilance that lingered in every corner. Isaiah worked alongside the other slaves, hands raw and calloused, mind alert to every movement. He observed the overseer from a distance, noting the subtle shifts in demeanor, the brief glances that suggested suspicion but not certainty. Dunn's presence was a constant reminder that the world they inhabited was unrelenting, and that courage would always be measured against the harshest possible scrutiny. Despite the weight of responsibility, there was a quiet satisfaction in Isaiah's chest. They had acted rightly. They had protected life, confronted injustice, and upheld a measure of truth in a world designed to suppress it. That knowledge, while insufficient to erase fear, provided a foundation for continued action and moral clarity. Later, when the sun had climbed higher, Isaiah found a moment alone beside the fields. He observed the younger boy playing cautiously at the edge of the yard, the faintest smile breaking through the lingering tension on his face. Isaiah's thoughts drifted to the nature of courage, responsibility, and consequence. Every choice they made carried risk, yet inaction was far more costly. To survive without moral integrity was to live half a life, bound by fear and submission. To act, even when danger was immediate, was to claim the fullness of humanity, flawed, vulnerable, but profoundly real. Anne approached quietly, standing beside him without speaking. For a moment, they watched the boy together, the silence between them unbroken yet filled with understanding. No words were necessary. The shared experience, the recognition of risk, and the acknowledgement of courage conveyed more than speech ever could. Finally, Anne spoke, voice soft but firm. The overseer will not forgive easily, but you have proven that courage and integrity can alter outcomes, even in the harshest of circumstances. Remember this, Isaiah. This is a lesson that will guide you in all the days to come. Isaiah nodded, absorbing the weight of her words. The plantation would continue to demand vigilance, intelligence, and moral courage. The overseer's malice would persist, the system of oppression would endure, but the small acts of resistance, protection, and truth had meaning. They had shaped outcomes, protected lives, and affirmed the value of integrity. As the day progressed, the rhythms of labor and activity filled the plantation with a semblance of normalcy. Slaves moved through the fields, overseers patrolled, and the master remained vigilant. Yet beneath the surface, subtle shifts had occurred. The knowledge of courage, action, and moral consequence had begun to ripple through the hidden corners of the plantation, a quiet undercurrent of change. Isaiah remained watchful, but there was a sense of quiet resolve in his heart. He had faced danger directly, intervened to prevent injustice, and acted in accordance with his conscience. The moment of truth had passed, and he had lived to witness the result. Life preserved, innocence protected, and moral clarity maintained. As evening approached, the younger boy approached Isaiah, carrying a small basket of water and bread. I wanted to help, he said softly. Even if it's little, I want to do something. Isaiah smiled faintly, placing a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. You have helped, he said, by surviving, by trusting, by letting courage guide you, even in fear. That is enough. And watched from a distance, her presence a steadying force. The actions of one can ripple outward, she said quietly, almost to herself. And courage, even in the smallest measure, can create change. Never forget that. The night settled over the plantation, dark and quiet, yet filled with a subtle sense of peace. The overseer's malice would endure, the hierarchy of authority would persist, but the small victories, the acts of courage, protection, and moral clarity, had left an indelible mark. Isaiah, the younger boy, and Anne had acted rightly, and in doing so, they had carved a space for hope, integrity, and survival. As Isaiah lay on his cot that night, eyes staring at the ceiling, he reflected on the events of the past days. Fear, courage, consequence, and moral choice had intertwined to shape his experience. He understood now, fully, that life in such a world required constant vigilance, deliberate action, and the willingness to face danger for the sake of justice and truth. The plantation would remain a place of hardship, cruelty, and oppression, yet within it, the human capacity for courage and integrity had asserted itself. And in that quiet reflection, Isaiah felt a measure of peace. They had faced the storm, acted with courage, and protected the innocent. The overseer's malice had been checked, if only temporarily, and the consequences of action had proven meaningful. The world remained harsh, yet in their small corner, the power of moral choice had endured. The night deepened, stars breaking through the clouds in scattered points of light. Isaiah closed his eyes, the weight of fear giving way to the faintest measure of hope. They had acted rightly. They had risked everything, and in doing so, they had altered the course of events, preserved life, and upheld truth. For Isaiah, the resolution was simple yet profound. Courage mattered, integrity mattered, and even in the darkest and most oppressive circumstances, the human spirit could assert itself. The plantation would continue to demand vigilance, courage, and moral clarity. Yet in that night's victory, quiet, precarious, and hard-won, there was proof that action could shape outcomes, protect life, and honor the fundamental worth of human conscience. And in the stillness, with the younger boy resting safely and Anne watching from a distance, Isaiah allowed himself a final, quiet thought. The world may be cruel, the overseer relentless, and the system harsh, but courage, truth, and the choice to act rightly could never be taken away.